Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Healthy Project podcast. I am your host, Corey Dion Lewis. I have a great guest in the building today. I have George. He is the founder of Basis, a startup that automates healthcare planning using data-driven, person-centered care approach that integrates effortlessly into our daily lives. His mission is to reduce friction and expenses while improving an individual's health results via an AI assisted autonomous care model. George, thank you so much for being on with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks
Yeah. So, before we get going, before we start talking more about your goals with Basis and just really wearables in general and the future of that, how about you tell the people a little bit about yourself and what gets you up in the morning?
Sure. So I've spent many years as an athlete. I spent years in the Army. I spent years building healthcare solutions. I grew up in a healthcare environment. So I've been, from a very young age, groomed to thinking about healthcare and health and wellness in many different ways from many different angles. In a way, I've grown in a privileged environment that I've had the chance to understand things from a very young age and understand how to make the right decisions on a day-by-day basis, think long-term. And as I got more and more into healthcare, I realized how many people end up having long-term chronic health issues as a result of just not understanding how to make the right decisions, not having the right health literacy, not having the right access to understand how to plug the right things in their life, like the friction that's involved with health plan. Like it's a hard thing when you've never been taught how to do those things. So one of the most formative experiences I had, I was working on a pacemaker about 7 years ago, and we were going around in clinics working with surgeons. And one of the surgeons, I remember this was in UCLA Torrance Hospital. He told us that this week alone he had finished 14 amputations.
Wow.
And amputations, byproduct of obviously diabetes and related diseases. That was shocking to me, and that really made me think, okay, we really need to do a better job of helping people prevent getting to that point, right? That's really the biggest impact we can have, or at least I felt that I could have in this world. And over the years, I also lost a few people, especially then I got more into, the annual care, the annual checkup, right? I had two people in my life, my stepdad and my father-in-law, passed away within a 5-day span.
Wow.
Instant heart attacks, no saying goodbyes, nothing. They both had just finished doing an annual checkup. They were cleared as if there's nothing wrong, but clearly we know, cardiovascular disease is a chronic condition. So those kind of things kept, chipping away and making me more passionate about enabling people to control their day-to-day life, their lifestyle risk factors, and understand how to live better, increase quality of life, increase health span, ideally improve lifespan. So that really excites me every day. So that's really my most exciting thing. And as an extra bonus, I'm super excited about the potential to improve and optimize our performance capabilities as humans. I think there's so much untapped potential because we're limited by just chronic illness and just not understanding our bodies at a biological level.
Right. So not only is it needed, and as the world is changing, these things are needed, but it's also personal for you because you have that experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, exactly. Once you have the experience, it becomes personal. Like you have a vendetta against illnesses, right? Like you want to go after them. You want to try to solve it for other people, almost like getting back at the people you lost. So
absolutely. So with everything that you're doing, what does seamless healthcare look like? I know you kind of talked about that before. When you say seamless, what does that look like or sound to you?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things that if we look at the healthcare experience today, there's a big part of it is let's say you go to the doctor, they identify you have high cholesterol, right? So the post-care directions would be start eating healthier, start improving your sleep, exercise more. But that gap, the undefined thing of exactly how to implement that in your life, what is a good exercise? How exactly do I eat healthy for multiple meals, right? Like all those micro decisions create so much friction. And because they're not factoring in what does your day look like? Like, do you even have time to spend to go and think of all your meals? Do you have time to go exercise? Do you understand where to go exercise? So all those micro decisions end up creating bad habits that end up getting people, we have terrible readmission rates, right? Like, people get out of surgery, they get out of doctor's appointments, and they end up going back to the hospital because they don't understand how to put these things in their day-to-day life. So seamlessness is the idea of reducing the friction points, reducing all the terms and all the indecision and all the difficult decisions that need to be made on a personal level every day, and just being presented with the right decisions for you every day.
Right.
That alone could have improved outcomes. Sorry.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with the chief medical officer of Withings, and we were kind of talking about, or she had said a lot of some of the pushback from providers when it comes to wearables or the information that they give is that it takes a little bit of that control away from the provider. But it sounds like, in just what I understand from what you do, and in wearables in general, it's not necessarily there to take away power, but to empower the provider and not into that in that patient. What are your thoughts on where wearables, what their role is within the healthcare system?
Yeah, I know the sentiment. I think there's a couple of things that, number one, I want to say that my team and I see user-generated health data, and that is predominantly wearable data, but there's other forms of that. We think that that's going to become the dominant, the primary source of how we make health and wellness decisions in the future. Like in a decade from now, I think predominantly we're going to be making decisions based on things that are real-time, continuously integrated with the person's life. Today it's EMR data, doctor visits.
Right.
That's not dynamic. The reality is, we have doctors that have to see 6 patients to make money, right? Like the economics of that just don't make sense. If you have 10 minutes to spend with a patient who's been waiting 3-4 weeks to see you, clearly you don't have time between visit, right, to see what happened, what perspired, are people following up with these? So I think there is a trust issue. I think as we bridge the trust issue, so and a big part of this is building good enough models that make sense of these wearable data and create things that a healthcare practitioner can actually put in use, right? So I think as those things come into play, the integrity of the health data is improved, the battery life and all these things, so that we have better kind of user experiences. I think healthcare professionals will start embracing that and finding that not only is it helping them create better outcomes for their patients, but also it's actually going to become a good source of additional revenue. Like you have CPT codes now that enable remote monitoring visits based on alerts that they weren't making money before. Like all of a sudden you can spend 5 minutes as a follow-up because someone fell off the tracks, right? Or something like that. So I think that the economy, the multi-sided economy, is going to come through over the next few years. But of course, it's up to wearable technology to continue to improve, and Apple, Google, Samsung, they've all put it as a primary emphasis, as a big piece of a major category focus. And people like us trying to make the sense of that data for people.
Right. And that brings up a good question. That's something we were kind of talking about before we start recording, is making sense of the data, especially for those that may have a low health literacy, or may be getting so much information they may not know how to break it down. What are your thoughts on that, and what are some things that we can do to improve that through our wearables?
So that's actually the number one piece of feedback we've received from over 500 user interviews. People say, I see the data, like my Whoop, my Aura, my Fitbit has great data, but I don't really know what to do with this information. It's great that I see my sleep score, but great, how do I actually put that to improve? How do I improve that? How do I put that into using my day-to-day life? There's things that you and I may take for granted, that what resting heart rate is, what average heart rate is, HRV, blood pressure. People don't know what these numbers are. These are arbitrary numbers for them at the end of the day. Yes, we can provide some context, but it's still not something that's easy to comprehend and implement in your day-to-day life. So what we're doing is, and my team and I are all data science backgrounds, specifically for health data. So we've been working on identifying things like circadian day rhythm, so individual circadian rhythms, hunger rhythms, fitness level assessments. There's all these amazing, cool things you can do with wearable data that actually put things in context in a people's day-to-day life. So you wake up, you see things that you never knew your wearable actually could, outputs that you never knew your wearable could actually come up with. And that's how you get people to find excitement in wearables, instead of just that short-lived excitement of, oh, I'm tracking my steps, you know, I'm tracking my sleep. Great. After some time, that becomes boring. There's nothing exciting about that. There's a lot of people trying to incentivize use with, you know, monetary rewards and other things. And I think those things have a place. But I do think there's a big health literacy thing that we can bridge, especially even more so for people with, you know, lower income, that haven't had the chance to grow up in a situation where, you know, understanding their heart rate and HRV and blood pressure and all that kind of stuff was taught from a young age, or even, you know, what's a good nutritional, when should you eat? What's the impact of eating sugar late at night? All those kind of things.
Right. It's just telling a story better. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you said, like it's almost, and I'm thinking about the wearable information we back in the day, like when it was just Fitbit or whatever. It was like, you know, I got my 10,000 steps and it said I slept 6 hours a day, but what do I do with that? That's great. Or I got my 8 hours in, but it wasn't putting the pieces together as far as, okay, and someone like we've been talking, who has the privilege of understanding the data of, okay, I know I slept 6 hours and I know that I overate my calories, because probably my sleep has something to do with that, or my whatever. I can make those adjustments, but some people may not understand to make those adjustments, or even know what adjustments to make.
And the interesting thing you said there, may not understand, is also, if you don't understand, despite the desire to change, and I think inherently, like, everyone wants to be healthy. I don't really think everyone's like, I want to be unhealthy, I don't care, you know, like people may like, you know, different types of foods and they may not enjoy working out, but I think inherently everyone wants to be healthy. But I think you also see that many people get discouraged when they try to get healthy, whatever healthy means for them.
Right.
They don't understand why something isn't working. And that's where personalization matters so much. And that's where making a right decision consecutively, or like understanding how to get back on track, is super important. There's so many people that give up, you know, because, you know, like, oh, I did everything right, I thought, you know, like this one size fits all plan, it didn't work out, now what? And I think we have so much data in our hands. There's so many new health data sources coming over the next 3-4 years. We're going to be able to do so many exciting things with just the data we collect passively. Passively that's the dream. Like, you don't need the person to actually give you information. Yeah.
Do you feel like that passive data is the most important data? Because I feel like some of that passive stuff that we do plays a huge role in our overall health, the things that we're not thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think fundamentally humans have there's a flaw in us giving, you know, subjective feedback, right? You'll see people go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, they may say something, but that's not really the every single piece of, like, maybe they say they sleep well, but in reality they don't sleep well, right? Subjectivity plays a huge part in how you give feedback to healthcare professionals. Like, you tell your health coach, right? Like in your case, like you have someone come and say, oh, I've been eating perfect every day. Really? Like, do we know? But it becomes, as the integrity of the data improves and as the user experience improves, I think it becomes a much better source of truth that we can evaluate what's working and what's not working. So I definitely think it's a big piece. And I think, you know, you don't have the thing of forgetfulness and prioritization. Like, people don't have to think about in their lives, oh, let me measure my blood pressure, let me measure my heart rate. It's constantly happening. And you can understand nuances in your life that you didn't understand before, that, you know, that were influencing, like your stress levels, your sleep, what was influencing it.
Right. George, so, you know, when we talk about, you know, wearables, and like, I guess I have an Apple Watch, and for a lot of people that I serve, I may get like, well, I can't afford that. You know, can you talk a little bit about access for wearables for all people?
Yeah, so I like to say that we're probably about 1% where this scales into the future. If you think of mobile, it was only 15 years ago that mobile really took off. So imagine the world right now without mobile. Like, who doesn't have a mobile phone? And then, you know, smartphone even, right? Now imagine what the wearable industry will look like 10 years into the future. We're looking at wearable growth numbers that are faster than what mobile was, a decade ago. So Apple, Google, Amazon, they're all telling on their earnings calls that this is like one of their most important categories. We're looking at a doubling of wearable shipments in the next 2 years. So we're looking at like in the next 5 to 6 years, everyone's going to have a wearable. It's not going to be a question of access. They're going to be cheaper. They're going to be more potent. And it's just a matter of, putting that to use for everyone.
Right. I couldn't imagine not having my cell phone. And just putting it in that perspective is crazy, because from the person with the least resources to the most resources, they have a cell phone.
And imagine how many things you can do today just enabled because of that cell phone, right? That you couldn't do 15 years ago.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So with basis, I would love to know more about, I'm really interested in AI within the healthcare industry, or, the healthcare system. How do you see AI, outside of wearables and the things that we can do? What is the future of AI in healthcare in your opinion?
Outside of wearables?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, that's something I have a general idea, but I haven't played too much. I haven't tinkered too much with that data, but I do understand that one of the biggest challenges is just having a common framework of, labeling the data. That's a big source of frustration. Obviously, there's, you have doctor notes, you have all these different types of data sources, right? And there's common standards that are coming in play. There's data mining, for text notes and all that kind of stuff, but it's really hard. That's one of the challenges. So creating a common framework, a lot of efforts around the world, and work on, especially in the United States, trying to get that to happen. The other issue is the identification and anonymization of data. So it's one of those things where it's great to anonymize and de-identify for preserving patient privacy, but at the same time, to an extent, that is hampering the ability to create, better models. And there's people in the health AI community that are, trying to find alternative ways to de-identifying, so that we can improve the ability to find patterns. And then the third thing is, I think, just finding I just think there's more studies that we need to do to understand in what areas can EMR data be used to actually identify patterns and improve outcomes. And there's a lot of projects out there to understand, like there's anything from like, to which point did the care start? Like how early did the person come? How long did they have to wait to get an appointment? There's all these sources of friction that are being identified, and then including to pre-existing conditions, genetic conditions. How do you, like, one example is genetic cholesterol. It's called cholesterolemia. So identifying, it's potentially one of 4 people in the United States have some form of genetic cholesterol. So identifying the precursors to that, or the lifestyle related data points that we're tracking in, just normal medical visits, to understand who should go and do a follow-up test to identify. So there's all these cool preventive, especially things that I'm excited about that we can do, but it requires a lot of coordination and a lot of data sharing. That's a challenge.
Right. And, going back to the wearables a little bit, George, I was just sitting here thinking about, so we have, watches, I have my handy app, my Apple Watch here. We got Withings, we have rings, there are so many different types of wearables, and they all say that they provide the most accurate, best data. Right. Right. So where's the truth at? Is there a such thing as, does the ring have the best data, or someone who's looking to, find a wearable to improve their health? Where should they start, or what should they be looking at?
Yeah, good question. I think the cool thing with having rings and having something like the Whoop that doesn't have a screen, and then having an Apple Watch that has more functionalities than just health tracking, it gives people the chance to decide what makes sense for them. We have different price points. The Whoop is now, a monthly based subscription, whereas the Apple Watch is, as a pretty expensive upfront investment. So I think there's one side there which you have to figure out what fits in your lifestyle so that you wear it the most, right? Like I think that matters to an extent, because if you're getting a wearable with the intent of wearing it sometimes a day, you're not going to get the best outcome. But when it comes to finding the wearables that have, like the Garmin, for example, has a better sampling rate, a better heart rate sampling rate than the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch takes several seconds to sample a heartbeat, whereas the Garmin does it almost every second, I think. So there's situations like that where that continuity of data that breaks is way more valuable coming from a Garmin than an Apple Watch. The Apple Watch, though, has things like, pre-existing activities. So maybe the user experience gets you to track more information. So it really depends on, I think the person matters a lot. Some wearables, like the Oura Ring, have temperature tracking, which is a pretty interesting data point, especially with COVID. We saw that it was a way to identify COVID. And actually, in my case, I ended up, I saw the day before my temperature was rising out of norm. And before I even experienced the symptoms, I realized I was going to be hit with COVID the next day.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, to an extent, like there's these subtle things that happen in our life day to day that wearables can pick up that we're just not aware of. Like we have our life going on. And that's the cool thing of preventive, that we can see these subtle changes and not send them to healthcare professionals, right? Like we're not saying that people should be their own doctors, right?
Right.
But we can alert, hey, something's off. Maybe you should get this checked.
Right. It's that constant, it's almost like that constant health coach with you. Like there's always someone there to check to see how you're doing, where you're at. Hey, this is a little bit off. And you can kind of make that decision for yourself on, okay, do I schedule that appointment with my doctor, or do I do X, Y, or Z?
And it doesn't necessarily mean, so I think there's a place for automated AI health coach, right? But there's also very, very close interconnected how the human element comes in, right? So number one, there's people who prefer AI versus human, right? There's both sides. So in trying to improve outcomes, we need to find a way to satisfy both people. So maybe natural introverts may feel more comfortable not interacting with someone on a day-to-day basis. So the second thing, though, is that as a health coach, understanding this information, having it constantly available, we have a lot of health coaches, nutritionists, fitness trainers who are using Bases for their own clients because they want to have a way to better understand on a day-by-day basis how to make their decisions better and easier for their clients. So I think there's a place in an ideal world. AI and humans are working very interconnectedly to do the thing that no human wants to do, which is data processing.
Right. Just the word data processing sounds it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting just thinking about it. So like, let somebody else do it.
And especially if you have multiple clients, and ideally you have, dozens, hundreds of clients, right? So how are you going to do that? Like, there's no way. Like, you're not gonna, you can't charge for that. The economic model doesn't make sense from the client side. So it's a way to enable everyone to get better outcomes. You have happier clients, they get better outcomes. The AI does its job, and naturally that hopefully fits in together.
Right. So what are some other wins that you feel like that you've heard from other users of Bases? Like, what are some things that you're excited about that you're doing now that you feel like is just going to change how we see preventative care now?
Yeah, we're not super focused on healthcare outcomes yet. We're still on the wellness and kind of like,
oh, gotcha.
So at this stage, but things like, the circadian rhythm piece, people are telling us they're deciding their day based on when they have their most energy now. So and Bases inherently has this function where you can allow us to automatically plan your ideal times for working out, for eating, going to sleep. So we have a lot of people using that, and we're creating accountability by booking things on their calendar. So we know already that putting something on your calendar is much more likely that you do it. We're blocking the time. So just behavior change, right? Like, we're creating behavior change, but instead of it just being every day at 7 p.m. I'm going to go, it's something where it has some biological functionality. So let's say you didn't sleep as well yesterday. Maybe we'll cancel the workout because your body's just not ready to work out. Maybe something shifted, or maybe you just have a bunch of meetings until 6:30 p.m. Is it realistic you're going to go be in the gym at 7? Probably not. So there's a push that happens there. So there's a lot of natural things that happen that that's why it's health planning on autopilot in a way, is that we're making all those decisions with the least friction for you to like go and look at your data. We're seeing a lot of people understand connecting the dots between working out and eating times and sleeping. So for example, for some people, it's better for them to work out in the morning. Others, it's better to work out in the evening. It has a different outcome on their sleep. So people are making decisions to optimize their day around that. And there's just a number of things that different users are identifying in their life. Understanding that hunger rhythm. So I mentioned it, and I think it sounded like it was something maybe you haven't heard of before, but naturally throughout the day, your hunger just progresses. It's actually, there's some synchronicity with the circadian rhythm. So throughout the day, your hunger increases all the way through to your evening peak. So like your second kind of energy spell of the day. Let's say for someone that might be until 8 p.m. and then it starts going down again. So naturally people aren't as hungry in the morning, but they're more hungry during nighttime. So that helps you like really think about, understand why, even if you try to eat healthy, like if you try to eat small portions, why you're in the night, you might still be hungry.
Right. So yes, and you're correct. When you said that, I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. So this information is given even without someone tracking their calories. It just kind of goes off of their rhythm or whatever wearable they're using.
Correct. So the rhythm things, like, we're using for different models, we use things related to sleep, your activity levels, your heart rate. The sleep thing is, you look at different days when you wake up, when were you more rested? So you look at HRV, you look at resting heart rate, you look at the user's real activity levels. So we don't need calorie levels. We're creating a rhythm model. So yes, people may eat a much bigger meal, and that may change their, might make them more, increase their satiety. And there's other things that influence ghrelin and, leptin, like the hormones.
Right.
But, to an extent, like that rhythm is there. Now you can influence that with different things that you do in the day, like your circadian rhythm. You can influence it if you're drinking crazy coffee all day, right?
Right.
And Red Bulls and, everything. But to an extent, that information allows you to understand what your body is naturally trying to do. And we think that information is super empowering. Understanding continuously what your fitness level is, right? 1 minute and 3 minute, heart rate recovery data. So there's all these interesting things that we can do passively from the same data you're already collecting to apply in your life.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I've been talking a whole lot about what you do from the aspect of like your average person, but I feel like this information would be great for an athlete, you know what I mean, or someone who's maybe in their preseason workouts. Have you kind of thought about that, or what is that, or do you have athletes using this already?
Yeah, all our team was ex-athletes. I did I was a sprinter and a triathlete. So Nick on the team was a national tennis player. Everyone on the team has had some kind of athletic background, and we're speaking with collegiate teams first, and we haven't gone down the route of professional teams yet. But there's a lot of interesting information there. The one thing with athletes is that that data is interesting, but to an extent, you can't personalize things too much if people are working together as a team, right? So like you can't. If you're an Olympic athlete doing an individual sport, it's perfect, right?
Right.
When I was playing on a basketball team at some point, like, I couldn't say, you know what, this is not my peak energy time. Like, I need to come back later.
Time out, coach. I got it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's super empowering. If you look at Olympic athletes who are natural early birds and they're doing early races, they do better than, athletes that are, night owls, and their peak is naturally later because your body is just in a different energetic state. So there's all these things that actually have to do with athletic performance and what your biological kind of rhythms are.
Right. That's super. I'm almost kind of jealous You know what I mean? It's like all this great stuff is happening, and I'm washed up. Like I haven't played sports in a very long time, but it's like, man, I wish when I was running track in college, I wish I had something like this, or you know what I mean? But
Me too.
he was like, hey, just carb load the night before and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I think collegiate. So I had some pretty good guidance, but it was again one size fits all. Like they were
Right.
telling us, if you eat this way, it's better for you if you do this workout. But there was no factoring in, did I sleep well? I was going on 4 hours of sleep many times and doing like 4 hours of training the next day. So I ended up having injuries, like that's injury prevention right there. So there's so much stuff that we do, and it's almost like we're driving in blind. And now we have this potential, and we haven't even talked about like 10 years from now, implantable wearable technology might be the better source. So like you don't even have to think about battery life. It's like super long form, much better in data integrity. So there's I think as humans we can elevate our performance so much with the data that we're collecting on a continuous level. And we can, some people they'll be doing it for athletic performance. Some people will be doing it for improving their, focus, being able to be more productive. Other people will have to do it to prevent chronic illness or to manage chronic conditions, right? So it's I'm super bullish on what we do over the next decade with, wearable data, especially.
Absolutely.
As humans, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question here, and you kind of brought it up a little bit, is personalizing your data to what your specific goals are. So you said focus, right? And maybe someone who struggles with attention deficit or whatever the case may be, how can they use the data from what, I'm not saying how, but it sounds like they can use this data and get the information best for them to show, okay, these are your peak times of performance, I guess, right? Does that make sense?
So if you don't have inherent, like ADD, right? So if you're someone that doesn't have ADD, you might find it easier to focus faster. You might find it easier to get away with doing productive work, even when you don't have a lot of energy, even when you didn't sleep as much. But what happens with pre-existing conditions or comorbidities or whatever it is that they accentuate any weakness, any performance weakness, any wellness weakness. So someone who's, let's say, bipolar, right? They're much more prone to circadian rhythm abnormalities than someone who isn't. So there's a person that has ADD, to go back to that example, can actually increase the likelihood that they can actually focus if they focus on those energy hours. And if they can improve their consistency, improving their sleep, understanding biologically how their body works, can actually get them. And with the coaching piece is enabling them to increase how much energy time they have, and enabling them to improve their sleep. And it's not just sleep; it's like exercising actually can help you with your productivity and focus. So understanding when to exercise, how much to exercise to get some kind of energetic outcome. Which you can then put to productivity time. All those things are things that are possible. And yeah, it doesn't work for everyone. And that's where the back and forth has to come, where the user has to tell you this is, accurate or not accurate, and then you can make adjustments. But I think all those, any condition, any existing condition can be severely accentuated when you're not following an optimal path.
Right. So having you have the information, then you're able to create a strategy with that information to improve your health outcome or whatever you're trying to improve to get better. But that information allows you to get that, to improve that strategy.
Correct. Yes. I mean, it helps you. I think there's so many things that we do that, let's say I go and have coffee during my low energy time. It's not going to do much. It'll help, but it won't do as much as, if I take it during a time where I'm already coming up with energy. If I'm naturally kind of trying to fall asleep and I'm trying to stay awake and do productive work, I'm probably going to fail. So depending on any situations, like any ADD again that you might have, that might frustrate you. You might say, I just can't do it. So that completely changes your path in life, right? You're saying,
Right.
I just can never focus. I can never get anything done. Whereas other people may just do a better job of, optimizing their times, and they can squeeze a lot more value out of those, productive 4 or 5 hours every day.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, George, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me
Thank you,
today.
brother.
I really appreciated it. If anybody wants to learn more about you and what you're doing, where can they find you at?
Basishealth.io, our website. So go there. You can. We're launching on the App Store this month, but for now you can request early access and get access to beta. You get a white glove service from our team, so a lot more customized feedback to understand your wearable data. And yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, George, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. And I'll have all that in the description of this episode when it goes live. So if anybody doesn't hear it, it'll be in the description. But everyone, again, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I'll holler at you next time.